Respected speaker of the day, my dear students and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you. Good afternoon to you first, and welcome to all of you to this joint KAAPI with Curiosity talk, which is being hosted jointly by ICTS and JNP. And we have a very interesting talk today, the Indian savannas, about Indian savannas. But whenever I hear the term savanna, I always think of human evolution only in Africa. In fact, the way in which humans ultimately became bipedal, okay, that is the thing. So let's not go all the way to that far away. So in our country itself, we have varied vegetations, varied vegetation types. And anyway, the speaker today is going to enlighten us on this subject in a detailed way. Thank you, sir. Thanks for your kind gesture in coming and giving a talk on this interesting subject. And once again, welcome to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request Professor Pallavi Bhatt from ICTS to introduce the speaker.
Hello everyone, nice to see you all here despite the rains and the traffic. So first let me tell you a little bit about KAAPI with Curiosity in general and also about ICTS, and then I will go on to introduce our eminent speaker. KAAPI with Curiosity is like a monthly lecture aimed at general public. This was started in 2016 and it has been going on regularly. I'm sure some of you are regulars here. This lecture gives an opportunity to eminent scientists to convey today's science in discovering to the general public and also to convey their excitement. I would now like to tell you a little bit about ICTS. ICTS is International Center for Theoretical Sciences. We are primarily a research institute with about 32 faculty or so. And we are working on different subfields of mathematics, physics, and computers. So there are INT PhD, integrated PhD, and PhD programs. And besides all this, we also have a mandate to host many conferences, workshops, and programs with participants from all over the world. And an equally important part of the mandate is to carry out these outreach programs. We have many different outreach activities. While you know about the KAAPI with Curiosity, there's also something called Vigyan Adda, which is slightly higher than this, what you will experience here. So it's at a slightly higher level. And then there are things called math circles for school students. And there's a whole lot of other stuff. And in general, our YouTube website is extremely active in the sense that it's populated day in, day out. So there are many, many lectures. So I would recommend you all to go and check it out. In general, I would also recommend to check out the ICTS website for various other kind of activities that we do. So let me now go on to introduce Dr. Tamim Vanak. He is the Director of Center of Policy Design at ATREE. He's an ecologist by disciplinary training and has a PhD in wildlife science from the University of Missouri, USA. He's a highly published author with about 100 papers, book chapters, and articles, and on diverse range of topics, carnivore ecology, human-wildlife coexistence, savanna ecosystems, disease ecology, etc. He works closely on the science policy practice interface in ATREE's key areas of expertise in land conservation and restoration, livelihoods, and human well-being. As a senior fellow at S&M Center for Biodiversity and Conservation, his broad research interests are in animal movement ecology, disease ecology, One Health savanna ecosystems, and wildlife in human-dominated systems. Much of his current work focuses on the outcome of interactions between species at the interface of humans, domestic animals, and wildlife in semi-arid savannas and agro-ecosystems. He is or has served as editor in top international journals in the field of conservation. He has also served on the board of Society for Conservation Biology Asia chapter. He has received several prestigious fellowships, including the National Environment Science Fellowship from MOEFCC and DBT Wellcome, Trust Alliance Clinical and Public Health Fellowship. He was also the lead author of the One Health and Zoonosis program of the proposed National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Well-Being. With that, I would like to now go on to present a small memento to the speaker today for our appreciation towards this. Yeah, so let's go on to now an exciting talk by Dr. Vanak. Please take over.
Thank you, folks. Thank you so much for having me here to present this talk. It's a great pleasure to be here on this rainy. Well, I'm glad the rain has at least stopped on this rainy afternoon. Apologies again for the sort of technical glitches that we've had here. We're sort of trying to juggle a couple of different systems. I hope it all works out. I'm also experimenting with. Yeah, is it fine? Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm trying to juggle with this new format, and hopefully it works.
The Indian monsoon has arrived.
Can you hear that?
A chain of mountains that run along the west coast of India are the first to receive this life-giving bounty. But the Ghats are greedy. They act as a dam for these rivers in the sky. The plentiful monsoon winds, thus blocked, empty their precious cargo of rain onto the mountains, creating a long rain shadow to the east. While the Western Ghats luxuriate in dense forests, the drier eastern plains and Deccan Plateau make do with what little they get. Here, the rain comes later and is more fitful. As a result, this vast plateau, covering most of central peninsular India, is a savanna. The Indian monsoon has arrived. The Western Ghats, a chain of mountains that run along the west coast of India, are the first to receive this life-giving bounty. But the Ghats are greedy. They act as a dam for these rivers in the sky.
No, I want to advance the slide.
The plentiful monsoon winds, thus blocked, empty their precious cargo of rain onto the mountains, creating a long.
I think we're stuck on this for loop now, so we're only going to be listening to this.
While the Western Ghats luxuriate.
I prefer questions. Yeah. Okay, fine. Let's just.
You would prefer the questions at the end, so let's just wait for it.
No, that's fine. The previous one. I hope this isn't going to happen again because lots of videos. Okay. All right, let's get started. So you saw that short clip, and it talks about. And it talks about, the Western Ghats, the monsoons, and then it uses a weird term that we might have not heard before, the savannas. Now, when you hear the word savanna, this is usually what you have in mind, okay? The vast plains of of the Serengeti in Africa, teeming with wildlife, a diverse set of fauna, classically open grasslands dotted with trees, lots of zebra, lots of wildebeest, African elephants trudging through them. And if you looked at a map of where the major savannas of the world were, you would see something like this. Africa, parts of Asia, Northern Asia, grasslands in the prairies of North America, the pampas of South America, and so on. So this is what we've learned as part of our school geography. India is missing from this list very clearly. So what is that lady talking about? Where are the savannas of India? Well, let's take a break. Pause. What is a savanna? Let's ask. Can I have that mic? Yeah. What is a savanna? So the classical definition of savannas are basically that they are mixed, and apologies again for the text in this graph. I think Max and Microsoft don't like each other, so but the classical definition of a savanna is that it's a mix of tree grass systems where you have a continuous grass layer on the ground and a discontinuous layer of trees on the top. And within this bounds, within this broad definition, it can vary from completely open systems with very few trees, such as on the left, to moderate tree density in the middle, and even high tree densities, almost forest-like on the right. And this depends on how much rainfall comes into any given system. There are a couple of other factors, but it's mainly rainfall that's a key determinant of whether you have a very grassy system or you have more of a treed system. Okay. And if you look at areas in India which typically fall in what's called the semi-arid and semi-arid tract, you can see that there's a large part of Western India, parts of Central India, that sort of would maybe have savanna vegetation. But a vegetation map of India does not address this. Instead, what you see is one forest type after another. Okay? So who's wrong? Who's right? Scientists more recently have said, bioclimatic envelopes in India are actually similar, large parts of India, actually similar to African savannas. That's as you can see from this map. So all those light brown, light beige areas that you see, which classically falls within the African savanna realm, are also present in those same areas that the video talked about. The Deccan Plateau, the rain shadow of the Western Ghats. And it's a long rain shadow. It almost extends to the east coast. So you have lesser rain coming in those places. And that's where we also have India's open natural ecosystems. So this is a work, we've been working on this for about 15 years, trying to correct this misconception that there are no savannas in India. We actually do have savannas, and they extend throughout most of India. They're in fact one of the most predominant, or one of the most dominant vegetation types of the Indian subcontinent. Forests are only found in some areas. Most of what you consider to be forests are in fact savannas of one kind or another. And they're a diverse set of what we've called open natural ecosystems. That means they're not naturally forest-like, they're naturally open. And you can see from the sand dunes of Jaisalmer and deserts. Deserts are also natural ecosystems. The deserts of Western India, the Great Thar Desert, to what's called scrub areas in southern Karnataka or northern Karnataka, and various other places all over India. And what do they look like? You would be hard pressed to find a difference between these landscapes and those in many parts of Africa and other savanna belts. This is a stunning landscape called Dhavalpuri in Ahmednagar in Maharashtra. This is Rolapadu in Andhra Pradesh. These are the grasslands of Baramati in outside Pune. This is Yaula and Manmad in Maharashtra. And then something you'll be more familiar with if you're in Bangalore. This is Mudumalai. or Bandipur, you know. Again, it's a classical savanna. This is on the mesic end, which means slightly wetter end. A discontinuous tree canopy with the continuous grass cover. It fits your definition. Instead, here we call them forests. So this sort of imagination of what a forest is and what a savanna is due to a whole bunch of historical facts, primarily due to the British having interest in forestry in India, mainly extractive forestry. They wanted to take timber out of India, ship it to the UK, or use it for the railway system. But we know that savannas in India are ancient, millions of years old. And we know this through a range of historical information, archaeological information. But we also know this because a lot of savanna adapted species are still found here. Species that are unique to these dryland ecosystems. And at some point in our history, we also had those vast herds of antelopes. Okay, so this is something that a British officer, Colonel Cuthbert Larkin, wrote in a book published in 1888 called Bandobast and Khabar. He said, I had had some very good blackbuck shooting at Indore in January. Captain Norman Franks, the commissioner there, took me out one morning into the Maharaja Holkar's preserve. And on a large plain, we once saw quite a few thousand buck in different herds. Those scenes can no longer be visualized in India. They're gone. They're gone because of British activity, because of a lot of hunting. They're also gone because we've converted most of those large plains, those wide plains, into agriculture and cities and factories and so on. So that's part of our natural cycle. But we still have a few pockets of grasslands in India where we still have large predators such as wolves, the iconic Great Indian Bustard, which is now almost extinct. It is isolated to a few pockets, mainly in the deserts of Western Rajasthan. And we used to, at one point of time, have the iconic cheetah, which the government is now trying to reintroduce. Okay. So, let me get back to playing another clip. Most of these savannas are human-dominated now, but they still hide some secrets from us. They still hold a large amount of wildlife that has now learned to coexist with people. Species such as the Indian fox, the jungle cat, the golden jackal, and many others. These form what's called the Miso Carnivore Guild. Okay? So what is a Miso Carnivore Guild? Let's understand better. Most of you would have heard of the food pyramid. So you have your primary producers at the bottom, consumers in the middle, and so on. At the very top, you have your top predators, your tigers, your leopards, your wolves, and so on. But in the middle layer, just below them, one below the top, is also a suite of mesocarnivores, one just below the top. Species such as the Indian fox, which hunts small rodents, birds, such as the golden jackal, which is a scavenger but also hunts small mammals, birds, and so on. And these are primarily found in the grasslands and savannas of India. Species like the jackal, though, are more widespread. They can be found even in agricultural fields, they can be found in forests, but they are a denizen of our savannas as well. On the other hand, species like the Indian fox are found nowhere else, only in our savanna systems. And all of these species are now learning to adapt to human-modified landscapes. They're using whatever resources are available in these places, and they're just they're adapting to us, to our environment, to the changed reality of these times. So a few years ago, a bunch of us got together and said, why don't we study these species a little bit more, try and understand their ecology, because everybody's always talking about tigers and elephants and leopards. We know barely anything about these species. So along with Professor Maria Thakur from the Indian Institute of Science, we started a project to try and understand the ecology of these species. And we chose a site which had a good diversity of wildlife. And this site was not very far from a large city in Maharashtra called Baramati. And while we were looking for Miso carnivores, we also found large carnivores, such as the striped hyena in these places. Now the striped hyena is again another species that we know almost nothing about. Okay. This species is resident here. It's not in any forest. It's not in any large wildlife sanctuary in this landscape. It's living amongst humans, living amongst people inside agricultural fields, using small areas to den in, to continue its life. But it ends up mostly depending on what are called human-provided subsidies. So to study this, we put together a team of really enthusiastic folks. Folks such as Anjan Katna, who's a PhD student. So we put together a team of folks. Yeah. No, it doesn't play on the YouTube if I swap. So folks with varied with varied backgrounds came together. We put this team who started studying these species. And basically what we did was we tried to capture them, and a lot of this requires specialized equipment, so we got all of this equipment. Most of it had to, of course, be imported because we don't have that much of a wildlife program in India, so we had to import a lot of the specialized equipment, including traps, to catch these animals because, clearly they're wild animals, they don't want to be caught. And in this video I was going to explain to you how this trap works, but I think it's not playing, so I shall move on. But basically, be assured that these traps don't harm the animal. In fact, in this video, I put my hand inside to show you how it works. But unfortunately, you can watch the video. It's from a documentary that we made. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight. It's on YouTube. I'll share a link for it later on. So that's Abhijit Kulkarni catching one of our trapped foxes, Dr. Pramod Mahajan, the veterinarian, making sure everything's fine. We tranquilize these animals, we weigh them, we measure them. And so, as you can see, a diverse set of species were caught: jungle cats, Indian foxes, jackals, hyenas, and this is one of the first such large studies in India. And they were all measured, they were fitted with these radio collars so that we could follow their movements. Blood samples were taken so we could test for parasites, we could test for their health condition and so on. And for many of these species, we don't even have basic natural history measurements, so we were able to measure them properly. And all of this then, adds to the scientific literature, adds to the weight of scientific knowledge for all of them. And once all of this operation is done, then we allow the animal to recover naturally. And once it's fully recovered, we let it go on its way with a new piece of jewelry on its neck, which hopefully allows us to then gather lots of good information. But this work wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its failures. There were many times that we attempted to catch animals, and the animals had different ideas. Okay. So this was a failed attempt at trying to catch a hyena, which managed to get its head out, get its leg out of the trap and run away. Okay, and so that sort of left us scratching our heads, wondering what to do now. But eventually, we learned from these mistakes. We tried to outwit the animals. Jackals, in particular, are really clever. They would know where the traps are, and they would sort of slide forward like this, not to avoid being caught. So we figured out how to outwit them, and then we did. Well, what does all this give us? Basically, it then allows us to paint a picture of where these animals live. Okay, what do they do? Each of those dots is a location that we obtain from those collars, and it really allows us to get a peek into the hidden lives of these animals. Okay, How are they dealing with all of this traffic, this human presence here? So some species don't mind so much. You know, they're gone right after the people have left. Some species are using these areas only at night. Okay. And what we found though, and this is, some of this work is published, a lot more continues, the data are continuing to be analyzed. But basically, for the first time, we are able to get this core information about how these animals are using these landscapes. Home ranges of golden jackals, jungle cats, Indian foxes. And what we found was that some species, such as the Indian fox, mainly uses the grasslands. It avoids using any of the agricultural fields. So if the grasslands disappear, the foxes disappear from this landscape as well. But other species, such as the golden jackal, have almost exactly the opposite use pattern. They prefer the agricultural areas, and they use the grasslands only to move between agricultural patches. So they will actually benefit from agricultural expansion. You know, as long as there's food to be had, they'll be there. Species such as the jungle cat couldn't be bothered. They were all over the place. They were in grasslands, they were in agricultural fields, they were walking down the cities as well. So there was one jungle cat that we named Sultan that was actually walking in the city, you know, probably bullying the alley cats. So they are really adaptable. So some species are adaptable, some species seem to be very sensitive to changes in their habitats. So what does all this tell us? Tells us that, you know, there's a lot of wildlife, not just in forests, not just in wildlife sanctuaries, but in our backyards. All you have to do is just go a few kilometers outside Bangalore, and Bangalore is very special. We have Bannerghatta National Park there, we have leopards, we have elephants in our backyard. But if you go north of Bangalore or east, you will have all of these species as well. You'll have foxes, jungle cats, jackals right out here. There's blackbuck not very far away on Tumkur Road. So we are surrounded by various species of animals, wildlife, that are able to continue to survive as long as small patches of habitat remain. These animals are now learning to adapt or learning to survive with us. It's really up to us to be able to give them a little bit of space, leave some of these landscapes still intact. We don't need large wildlife sanctuaries for these species. We just need small patches. And if those small patches can remain, then this wildlife can remain as well. But the savannas of India are currently the most threatened landscapes or natural ecosystems left in India. And their challenges, or the challenges to their conservation, come from many different spheres, including from our demand for more power. A lot of our renewable energy projects are now being located on our open savannas because they're ideal for that. It's not forest. The savannas were never protected. So let's put some solar panels in there. Ironically, a lot of our green programs, all our green tree plantation programs, are also endangering our savannas. These places are not degraded forests. They were never meant to have trees, and yet we are planting tens of thousands of trees on our savannas and destroying them. We've also altered fire regimes. Fire is an important part of savanna ecosystems, and it needs fire. But in many places, as the climate heats up, we are seeing more frequent fires, more devastating fires. And of course, the invasive species, such as Prosopis juliflora, which tend to invade grasslands. And a lot of this also has to do with the historical legacy. This is basically a hangover of the British Raj. When the British came to India, they imagined India as a land of tigers and elephants, species which are found in forests. Africa is where the savannas were. So anything in India that was not a forest was therefore degraded. And if it did not provide revenue to them, then they called it a wasteland. And this categorization of wasteland persists today. And the Indian government has very enthusiastically taken this up and continues to publish this document called the Wasteland Atlas of India. And the reason for this is, the reason to identify areas as wasteland is so that you can now direct them to more productive activities. what we found is 70% of the savannas of India are classified as wastelands. In fact, the Wasteland Atlas has some really incredible and mind-numbing categories. All our glaciers, you know, the source of our rivers, are classified as wastelands. All of the Himalayas are classified as wastelands. All of our savanna ecosystems, our coastal plains, the sand dunes of Jaisalmer are classified as wastelands. So some of this is problematic and we need to change it, and we are working to change it, and hopefully we'll have better news in the next year or so. But we want to also say that these landscapes in India, the savannas, are not wilderness as we would imagine without people. People depend on it. If you eat meat, you've eaten goat or sheep meat, it's most likely come from one of these savanna landscapes. Okay? Millions of pastoralists depend on our open savannas for their livelihoods. The savannas are also important and need to be restored because they're important storage of carbon. Everyone's talking about carbon sequestration. Savannas store all their carbon below ground, in the soil, where it's secure. It can't be burnt away. It's more stable. And they do it at a fraction of the water cost of forest. Remember, these are all in our semi-arid landscapes. You can't grow carbon here as forests because there's not enough water. You'll have to pump out water from the ground or bring it in from somewhere else, and that's not sustainable. Also, as climate heats up, the chance of fires increases. So all of that carbon that's sequestered goes away in one wildfire. Okay? So the carbon that savanna sequester is more stable because it's sequestered below ground. And if you're able to restore these landscapes, you're also able to restore the biodiversity that's in them. You're able to sequester carbon and also enhance livelihoods of millions of people. So I'm going to end this talk with this on a slightly more hopeful note as well, with an effort that we're doing with partners in Maharashtra. I want to thank, of course, folks at the Maharashtra Forest Department. They've been really helpful for us, given permits to allow us to do most of our work. My partners in the Grasslands Trust, and of course, India Alliance DBT Welcome Trust for funding for all of this work. I forgot one funder, which is the IISc ISRO program. Those also helped us with the first tranche of funds. So I'll end here. I'll take some questions, and hopefully we can talk some more about savannas, wildlife, and all these cool animals that you just saw. Thank you. This is not.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vanak, for the wonderful talk. And thank you for ending on a hopeful note as well, and congratulations on the work that you all are doing. So I just saw the video in the end where you all are restoring grasslands by planting new grasses. And I just read about these few things about, they're doing it both in India as well as in Europe, where they reintroduce large herbivores. Can you comment on, whether that also helps build up grasslands and how it does? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So a lot of our grasslands, especially these semi-arid landscapes, have undergone fairly severe degradation over the last 30, 40 years, mainly due to neglect from several different players, neglect from the government, of course, which has been planting them up with trees for a long period of time, but also a breakdown of local management systems. So a lot of grasslands are also village commons, places that people used to use for pasture land. And they used to have rotational grazing activities. Most people may not know it, but we also have several different tribes of nomadic pastoralists who move between tens to hundreds of kilometers with their livestock. And these folks also practice this rotational grazing. And these systems have, due to various factors, fallen into disrepair. So for us, we have to really think about how people and these landscapes can come back together. So one of the things we've started doing is convincing people that instead of trees, you should plant grasses here, grasses which were native and are no longer found here, which are palatable. In fact, we asked them, what did we ask people who lived here, older folks in the village, what was this landscape like 50 years ago? And they would tell us, oh, we have this species and this species in the common name. And so we brought some of those back. We try and work, with bringing back some of those species, especially of palatable grasses that are no longer found, so that people start deriving benefit from these landscapes again. To your point of reintroducing or rewilding with large herbivores, well, actually most of these places have their herbivore community intact. So you have blackbuck, you have chinkara. These were the nilgai in many places. So these were the species that were normally found here and are still found here. Their predators, on the other hand, things like the wolf, are declining, not just declining in numbers, but also there's a danger of hybridization with dogs. There is talk now, now they've started the cheetah program. Obviously, that's a long way away from maybe another 20 years before you start seeing any viable cheetah population in India. But until you start protecting the habitat now, you're not going to have habitat left to introduce those cheetahs into. So the first thing really is to start thinking about trying to restore these grasslands, or at least preventing their further destruction at this point in time. So I hope that somewhat answers your question.
Hi, sir.
Hi.
Hi, sir. It's actually a beautiful talk.
Thank you.
So, because I'm from Bangalore now, and where I don't know about that species which have been in the outskirts of Bangalore, I'm really fascinated when you show that species like jackholes like that. So I have a question about reintroducing that cheetah into the project Cheetahs, where they brought more than 20 cheetahs to it. But why did the project fail? Because many cheetahs were died. So when then you reintroduce this cheetah into, does it fail, or does it need time to?
So the cheetah introduction program, it's not a failure as yet. I wouldn't call it a failure. Animals die, especially when cheetahs are a delicate species. They are not robust like tigers or leopards. So there will be some mortalities. Now there's been births also. My only comment on the cheetah program is that we need to protect the habitat first. It's a little bit cart before the horse type of situation. You've rushed to bring in a species, and you could well do it. There's no problem. It's fine. Perhaps one day we will have populations of cheetahs roaming India. But like I just said, there might not be the savannas left anymore. So if you don't have a program to first start conserving the savannas where cheetahs can potentially roam 20 years from hence, by the time you're ready, you have a big enough population. Already, you know what's happening with the cheetah program? Every time a cheetah goes outside the Kuno Wildlife Sanctuary, they dart it and bring it back. Because there's no way for them to go. They're going into villages, they're going into fields. That's normal for a cheetah to do. If you look at where they are in Namibia and in South Africa, most reserves are fenced. But Namibia, they have home ranges of over 1,000 square kilometers. They do range widely. And so you have to plan for that now. You can't say, when we have 50 cheetahs, then we'll move them out. You won't have anywhere left to move them out.
Sir,
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the nomadic tribes and pastoralists being able to sustain themselves on the savannas, since it seems kind of counterintuitive to allow them to graze their livestock on there, since livestock are they have run the risk of outcompeting the native species. So how exactly is this managed?
Okay. Again, great question. Look, India has had a history, tens of thousands of years of history of human civilization. None of the landscapes that we see around us are natural. In fact, there are very few landscapes on Earth which don't have a human footprint. Everywhere does. The herbivores that we see on, which is both native and wild herbivores, that we see on the savannas, they play a vital role in the establishment and the maintenance of the savanna ecosystem itself. Okay. With the pressure on this land, if people's livelihoods were not dependent on them, they would be that land would be gone and used for something else, which is currently what's happening. The Dhangars and the Rabaris and all these other different pastoralist tribes are as endangered today as the blackbuck and chinkara are. And yet, our demand for meat is increasing. So where are we going to get that meat from? We're going to have to develop more factory farming, which we all know is disastrous for animal health, human health, planetary health. Okay. So the production of meat in extensive systems is actually the most sustainable form of animal farming possible. And we need to encourage that. Also, it's one of the most climate resilient forms of animal farming. See, in most of these places, you can't grow more than one crop when it rains. That's it. What do people do for a livelihood? That's why they farm animals. And nomadic pastoralists, in fact, have amongst the lowest carbon footprints of anybody else. So their livelihoods are not what's causing competition with wildlife. They are transient. They come, stay for a couple of months, they're gone. Okay. It's our lifestyles that is putting a massive pressure on the grasslands and the forests and all the other natural ecosystems around us. So we actually need to encourage more nomadic pastoralism, better use of savanna ecosystem, more restoration of these landscapes. Let's put some money and resources to promoting this livelihood, to promoting this lifestyle. Unfortunately, the government, and this is not just the Indian government, the British started this. What you know as a breadbasket of India, Haryana and Punjab once used to be a pastoralist landscape. But you spent a lot of money bringing in water, canals, dams, etc. to grow food there. And now we know the consequences of that. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
So I lived in the Himalayan regions for a year, and there I also had the chance to meet the nomads of those areas. So what I understood was, in case they were not there, in case, you know, the herds of 70 plus goats with one human did not move, the leopards might not actually prey on, because hunting is not that easy. The terrain is very difficult. Also, in case these nomads, so you know the Valley of Flowers and all that, way back in the ancient times, what I heard was, the ones who actually gave nutrition, you know, in terms of manure to the grasslands for anything to grow were these nomads and their droppings, because their droppings are very fertile. And in case they don't move around, like they are not able to do that, even the bugyals or the valleys, they are slowly starting to die out. So this coexistence has been there since a long time, and this is only from the Himalayan perspective. I don't know what's, in this area, but in case nomads were not there, the health of that ecosystem goes down in so many facets that we cannot comprehend unless they are gone.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, exactly. In fact, there's the human footprint, the signature of human productivity is seen in all of our national parks, tiger reserves. Wherever you have the highest tiger densities is where humans settled first and then were moved out. And it's that history of nutrient enhancement that now creates productive areas for wildlife. In fact, the Serengeti itself used to have a lot more livestock before. and the nutrient hotspots in the Serengeti are where people had settled before. So it's people, again, you know, folks, humans are part of this planet. It's only in the last 100 or so years that we've started making such drastic changes to it that we are sort of affecting global processes. But the human signature is seen everywhere, in all ecosystems. There is no such thing as a pristine ecosystem, okay, without people. It all has human signatures on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for the talk once again. In 3 of your slides, when you were showing your results, you were talking about how some species benefit from, you know, agricultural gain, whereas others, you know, don't benefit. And in Brazil, many bird ecologists have noticed similar trends in, you know, bird species there with, you know, the Amazon and how deforestation has increased in the southern Amazon. And a lot of farmers, I guess it's because of the government, a lot of farmers are now dedicating at least 10% of their plot to preserving, you know, the rainforest, the natural rainforest. And I was curious if there are any similar initiatives between farmers, or whether it's like caused by the government or by farmers, to, you know, preserve the savanna landscape within India.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Fantastic. That's a lovely question. In fact, there are, and we are working. So some of those landscapes that you saw in that last Instagram reel are not village commons, which means they don't belong to the village, but are actually private commons. So there are a bunch of farmers who've come together and pooled their land so that they can be used for livestock grazing, and these are being preserved as savannas. So this is a form of natural land sparing, which is what you were referring to. It would be fantastic if we could actually have a model where we incentivized people to do that some more. And you could then, you know, either through carbon credits or whatever, try and, you know, they earn some more money from it so that they can maintain them as such. Because right now the pressure on land is very high. I mean, look, we are almost 1.5 billion people. Land is our most valuable resource, and it's, you know, the pressures to convert it are very high. So this is where we really want to try and provide more value to people who own their land, so that, because they want to hold on to their land, but competing interests might sometimes win, especially if the economic argument wins. So thanks.
Can we convert forest land into savannas and arid land into forests by human efforts?
Yes, absolutely. Forests, so a lot of degraded forests do look savanna-like. And especially as the climate changes, and as you know, climate change is a human-caused phenomena. Some of these places are actually going to get better. So that means you will start seeing more and more tree growth. So these open savannas might start converting into more woodland savannas. Although as rainfall increases, people also start converting them into agricultural areas. So you might lose them altogether. On the other hand, the forests of the Western Ghats, they are predicted to get drier. So you might see an increasing change of those forests to savannas, to woodland savannas. So that process is definitely possible. Again, in, you know, over geological time scale, it has happened multiple times. It's happening in the Amazon also right now, but in the Amazon it's caused by people, because people have started cutting away the edges of the rainforest so much that it's opening up the forest to forest fires, and then converting a lot of those landscapes into savanna-like landscapes, although they're not true savannas. So yeah, it's very much possible for it to go both ways.
Hi. So you talked about the productivity of the land, right? So although controversial, do you think any UN RED Plus project would be useful? Like at least it's worked in Kenya and Zimbabwe.
Yeah, look, the RED Plus system itself is not, you know, we've not had much success implementing it in India. And we are looking at a couple of different mechanisms to try and conserve savannas. But, you know, for the first thing that needs to change is the government needs to stop categorizing them as wastelands. I mean, that's the first thing that we are working on, because as long as they do them, then it's free for all for, you know, the district administrations are always looking for land on what to, you know, if a new industrial complex needs to come up, let's target the wastelands. If a solar plant needs to be put in, let's do it there. So that needs to change, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Oh, lots more.
So we have a few online questions
Okay.
From YouTube. Krishna is asking, what is the role of One Health in managing emerging infectious diseases? Does the role and responsibilities are defined in regulatory perspective? Do the roles and responsibilities are defined in regulatory perspective?
Okay, slightly off topic from this talk, but and maybe I'll invite Krishna to search on YouTube for one of my other One Health talks. But definitely One Health is a key guiding principle for mitigating the spread of zoonotic diseases, and the philosophy of One Health is very simple, and it's again rooted. So in Indian culture, we find it deeply rooted. But basically, it's saying that to have good human health, you also have good animal health and good environmental health, and they're all interconnected. So you can't view disease in isolation. You can't view the emergence of pathogens in isolation. They're all connected. So, but yeah, you know, connect with me later. I'll send you a few links to a couple other talks.
Sure. She has another question. Do similar climatic conditions in Africa and India facilitate the import or export of diseases such as yellow fever and tick-borne viruses? If so, how can we monitor and control their spread?
Yeah. Yes, we do have lots of tick-borne viruses emerging in India, especially in Karnataka, for instance. You have Casanur forest disease, and that's been spreading, especially over the last 30-40 years, into various districts and states. So there are similarities, there are going to be problems. Again, land use change is one of the main factors that causes the spread of diseases. So that's something for us to consider. There was a couple of questions here.
Hello. Thank you so much for this very interesting talk. You briefly referred to invasive species like, I think, Prosopis lantana causing destruction of these grasslands. Can you elaborate a bit more on that, and more specifically, what's really done or what can be done to control that?
So, you know, I didn't go, thanks for bringing that up. I didn't go into too much detail, but an invasive species is basically a plant or animal that is not native to this landscape and can then, and once introduced, it can outcompete, it proliferates very rapidly and then takes over the entire, so there's no natural balance that we think of normally. You know, we talk about the balance of nature, that's gone because there's no competitors, there's no predators, there's no herbivores for this species, and that's happened with lots of different species. So for example, here in southern India, we have Lantana camara, which has overtaken our forests. It was introduced as a hedge. You know, it's such pretty flowers, it looks lovely. Similarly, Prosopis juliflora was introduced in Western India because it's a hardy, it was introduced to combat desertification because people thought the desert is advancing into the thing. And ironically now it's converted most of our grasslands into green deserts because it's just overtaken them. Places in Rajasthan, places in Gujarat, and even here in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So managing invasive species once they've been established becomes a huge problem. It costs crores of rupees or hundreds of crores of rupees to the economy, but it also costs that much to remove them. So we have to learn to manage them now. Most importantly, we have to also put in place policies so that no new species come in. Because that's a danger. You know, what's already here, we have to learn to live with them, manage them where we can, but we have to also ensure that nothing new comes in. And this is where our government really does need to do a lot more. And there is currently no policy for this. So that's a challenge. Sure. Can we not prevent the ranging behavior? Can we not artificially provide them food in one zone, so that it gets trained and used to breeding within that, let's say, yeah. That's called a zoo or a safari park. It's not a natural system anymore. Within the natural system? No. Then it's not a natural system. Yeah, but that's why I'm saying it's not a natural system then. So what is, and this is a good question actually, and it comes to the core of our problem of what we view as nature and what we view as human. So we are saying, I understand what you're saying. I'm saying, so if you think of it, if you had to say, let's raise animals or let's get animals and feed them to tigers and leopards and cheetahs in one place so that they all learn to come there and eat, then the point being that they are not wild animals anymore. They're not fulfilling their role in their natural environment. Their role in their natural environment is as predators. So there is a system. So and this is important because actually the government does do this. In many places the forest departments do this. They bring food from outside and give, and I'm completely against that. The reason I'm against that is we need to protect, or we need to have our natural systems in place, not just for us to view them, but because also processes need to be preserved. There are ecological processes there. So don't feed animals. There is no such thing. There is no such thing. Because if populations increase, they will go out. Correct? Huh? We can't. How? Where will we manage them? No, whose number is high? Not tigers, not cheetahs, no.
So
we don't have any.
We have a couple of more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we can have the discussions over coffee after this. Yeah.
How does the government define wastelands? Do they take into account biodiversity of the place? Because one of the wastelands that were mentioned were marshlands, which are very biodiverse and...
Yeah, basically in I think 1986 or something, the government set up a committee to decide on the definition of, and they pretty much still follow the British thought process. That means that if you can't derive revenue from them directly through taxation, or if it's not in private use, then it's a wasteland. Okay, so there is no other consideration. The point also for wasteland was that it can be revegetated or brought to productive use with some effort. That part has more or less been ignored by the government. Instead they said, oh, it's a wasteland, let's convert it to something else that can be more productive, and that something else usually is either agriculture or it's industry. Okay, so yeah, none of those considerations. I mean, wetlands, marshlands, etc. They're really productive habitats and we're teeming with biodiversity, but they're not considered. So it's also because the Ministry of Rural Development is the one that comes up with the Wasteland Atlas, and they don't talk to the Ministry of Environment and Forests. So.
My question was, what puts Miso Carnivores in the second level of the food triangle?
Mainly size. Mainly size. Basically, you have the large predators on top, and predators, by their size, they're able to bring down very large prey, large herbivores. The Miso Carnivores are sort of, then making do with everything else. They are predating on smaller mammals, smaller birds, and play an important role. In fact, many places when you don't have top predators, there's a phenomenon called mesopredator release. And so then these animals increase in number greatly because the top predators also keep these populations down and can cause havoc to populations of birds and even small mammals, rodents, lizards, etc. So, yeah.
May I play the devil's advocate for a minute?
Sure.
As you pointed out, we're nearly 1.5 billion people, and many of us have increasing aspirations of different kinds. So doesn't that inherently prevent the kind of sensible things that you've talked about here from coming to pass?
Yeah, thanks. I actually have a slightly different opinion on that, and I'll give you two examples. So a lot of people we spoke to, the pastoralists, for example, in Banni, for instance, Banni in Kutch, we worked there for a long time with the Maldharis. Their identity is important to them. Their identity as Maldharis is very important to them. So they want to continue doing what they've always been doing. It is in fact government policies that has been forcing them to change, and all other sort of the socioeconomic systems outside have been forcing them to change. But they would prefer to, and even if they do something else, they still keep their livestock. Similarly with other groups, if the government supported them, gave them, made their livelihoods easier, they would want to continue, they want to continue what they're doing. So that's on the pastoralism side. We're actually posing, our aspirations are posing a hurdle to them. The other part, we've heard of farmer distress. If you consider most farmers in India are small landholders. A couple of acres is all they have. And most of them are in these semi-arid landscapes. Most of them get one crop. If they're lucky, they get two crops. There's poor support price, high input cost. A lot of them are in debt. These lands are marginal. We are basically we are encouraging them to fail at this point of time with our current agroeconomic system. So I think the time has come for us to rethink some of this. And we can do it under the framework of adaptation to climate change. Because, last year we had a drought in Karnataka. The rains are completely off. All of you, I'm sure, already know, our rainfall patterns have changed. Farmers can no longer know when to sow. They know when they're ready to harvest, it rains, a flood comes, it all goes away. So our food systems are going to be in great peril. So we have to reimagine our relationship with land from the food production side, and then think of what we can do. How can we provide landholders economic benefits that are tangible, sustainable, that will also then, it comes under the rubric of what's called nature-based solutions, where we can now actually lead to land improvement as an outcome of our development process. So there is no reason why development should lead to polluted rivers, polluted air, polluted everything, polluted soil. That's not, I don't know for whom that's, we are paying the price for it at every different level. So I do think we need to recalibrate. I know I'm slightly optimistic here, or I'm being a little evangelical, but this model won't sustain. We're already seeing the consequences of that playing out in front of us. Thank you. Thank you.
So there are two questions from my side. First of all is, how do you see the new forest rules which are being rolled out in 2023, which change the definition of reserved forest, and consequently the some of the ordinances of Odisha government were declared null and void by the Supreme Court. And how do you see the impact of these new rules rolling out, and the impact of the same on the endemic species of the biodiversity hotspot, and particularly the Western Ghats lying in the Maharashtra region? Secondly, the second question was, as you just mentioned, that the inverse impacts of invasive species. Do you think that promotion of genetically modified crops, or biotechnology, or the biomanipulation, or the bioremediation to handle the environmental crisis, or even the waste management, or even the e-waste, is promoting the harms caused by the invasive species?
Okay, first question. I think, and we've written about this a little bit. The rules are very problematic. The new forest, the amendment to the act. In fact, the Supreme Court has stated. Basically, what the government, anything that was only classified as forest land is what should be called forest land. And that's not. So in that case, then all the areas that were marked as deemed forest, so on, no longer have protection under the Forest Act. And that's usually problematic. We should not be reducing at this point of time, we should not be reducing safeguards to the environment that we have. We are, we are in an emergency. We are in a climate emergency. We are in a biodiversity collapse emergency. We cannot be tinkering with those safeguards anymore. If anything, we have to strengthen them. And unfortunately, this government has not had a good record in that. They've actually weakened most of our laws, both the environmental laws as well as the forest conservation laws. That's highly problematic. The Supreme Court has stayed some of this, so hopefully we'll see some sense prevail. Your second part, I do think we have to be careful when it comes to modifying organisms for more productivity. Let's also not forget that the people who benefit the most are the large corporations who have created most of these strains. And they're not, and governments are just pushing us into that without sort of thinking through it. I'm always wary of large corporations being in charge of food production. It's a bad idea.
And we can have the discussions over coffee.
There's a question here.
Yeah, coming again to the farmers' question, what is the kind of crops which these farmers are growing? Since it's one crop a year, I'm sure it probably is either millets or pulses or maybe cotton also, I'm not sure. So does that going to impact how they're going to get the livelihood from non-agriculture sources? That's going to decide the landscape.
Yeah.
So inevitably they may ask for semi-industrial policies in their favor. So how do you view that?
So a lot of these folks do grow dryland crops such as millets or cereals or pulses, and many places cotton is grown. Cotton, of course, is grown on the black cotton soil and not on the laterite soils. The laterite soils is where you have most of your savannas, and it's really difficult doing agriculture in many of those places. There are other options. There are what I've called nature-based solutions. We could look at potential carbon sequestration mechanisms. We could look at what's called agroforestry in those landscapes. Or even, there's a massive shortfall of fodder in this country. So even fodder production in these landscapes is possible. It's again low input, and it could be possible. Those models need to be worked out. We have to, we spoke to farmers in a lot of these so-called drought-prone districts, and they are in deep debt because they're just chasing the cycle of failed productivity. They are buying expensive seeds, they're buying lots of fertilizers and pesticides because they hope they've been told that's the only way to get an output. And at the end of it, they barely get, either the rain fails or their crops don't get them the value that they expect they should. So something else needs to be done. Even if it's industrialization, remember the footprint of industrialization is much smaller than large scale, the kind of agricultural system that we see, marginal agriculture we see. So a lot of land will go out of agricultural production in the next 20 years, either due to the climate or due to changes in people's aspirations. So how do we stop them being alienated from their land is what we need to figure out.
I have a question. So some of us have been doing some research with regard to grasslands, like in Bangalore, and when we were doing as part of our research, we were looking at GKVK. So that land was a common property resource. So similar to wastelands being converted to industrial lands and agricultural lands, a lot of it is also given to institutions like this IISc and GKVK, Shrishti, all of these large institutions that are pro-sustainability in a sense. But what actually happens is that these grazing lands get taken away from the people who are grazing there, and they are othered. They are forced to take up other occupations, and then especially in the case of GKVK, that same land is parceled into agricultural land for researchers to study agriculture. Do you think that there is some kind of I mean, there is a flaw in the research system where you study, let's say, researchers in NCBS study grasslands, but they study grasslands elsewhere, and they are othering the shepherds where they are.
So I mean, again, great questions. There's clearly a historical context to this, where, in fact, where we are in Bangalore now, this area, and Kantirava Stadium and Majestic used to be village ponds, which were commons. They were converted, the keres were converted, the tanks were converted to. So as cities grow, most of these lands do get taken up. And I'm skeptical that in the course of the city's growth itself, that those lands would have stayed the way they were. They would have gotten converted. What's problematic though is that, and let's think of it from a broader policy perspective. It should not be easy to convert commons lands into something else. In fact, there is a Supreme Court judgment that prohibits this. Unfortunately, that judgment is completely ignored because it's easy to convert commons to other, what is called public good. So definitely there's a problem there. We need to have a broader conversation. We need to have a policy dialogue. For example, the government several years ago took over the Charlakere Amrit Mahal Kavals. That was about 10,000 acres, which was for pastoralists, and gave it away to a bunch of different institutions, including DRDO, IS, BARC, and several others. So the pastoralists were again excluded from access to that land. And this goes on every day, everywhere. So unless we can't fix that, so just like there is a process to take over forest land. Even right now, forest land does get taken over for other purposes, but there is a process that has to be followed. There is no such process for commons land and for grasslands. And we need to put the same safeguards back in that process as well, in there as well.
A lot of good questions from here. We have a couple of more questions from the YouTube live stream, and then we can have a break. So Ajay is asking, do you think the behavior of Miso Carnivores is changing as our landscapes are changing?
Yes, definitely. For one, their interactions with humans or their dependence on human provided food, for instance, really affects the way they use the landscape. So the jackals and the jungle cats that I showed you, even wolves and hyenas, their main diet now consists of chicken. From the poultry farms, there are lots of poultry farms have come up there, and they just throw the dead chickens out. These animals come, and lots of dogs too. So they come out there and feast on these animals. So in many of these places, it's a dangerous game, because had a lot of our jackals die of poisoning, and jungle cats and foxes die of poisoning. So farmers will sometimes just spray some pesticide on the chickens to kill flies, and these animals come and eat them, and a whole bunch of them die. So it's a double-edged sword here. The presence of this resource allows them to occur at densities that would normally not be so high, but then death also comes easily. So there is a lot of change to their behavior. The jackals, for instance, live only in sugarcane fields. They don't have a natural vegetation that they are within. So they're adapting. Yeah.
Right. And Aditya is asking, how can landholders be incentivized to preserve long-term nature of the land while still pursuing agriculture on a remaining portion?
Again, that's a question that's called land sparing. That model is called land sparing, and that's for the government to really say, we value nature. Lots of other countries do it. I think a friend here mentioned this about as well. Lots of countries do it. They provide an incentive to farmers to keep aside a portion of their land uncultivated for nature. So it's called saving for nature. If any of you watch Clarkson's Farm, there's that show on Amazon. A large part of his farm is just wild because they get some benefit subsidies from the government to keep it that way. So that's a model that certainly we should think about copying or emulating in India, especially because we provide so many other perverse subsidies. You know, we provide subsidies to extract groundwater at unsustainable rates. We provide subsidies for pesticides and fertilizers that we know are polluting our soils and our water. And so, you know, maybe some sort of nature positive subsidies can also be given.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for attending this talk on this afternoon. Please join us for coffee outside. And if you are not registered in our email address list and you want to register for the list, just please come outside. I'll be happy to help you with that.
Gosh, that's the longest question session I've ever had in my life. So thank you all.